Where does civilization begin? Is it when humans first learned to farm, to write, to spin fibers into cloth? Or is it when they built cities, wheels, and empires? But all of that changed with one tiny microorganism. Nobody knows exactly where or how it happened. Instead of relying on independent artisans working at home, Italian merchants created workshops bringing weavers, spinners, and deers under one roof. They bought raw materials in bulk, standardized designs, and paid workers time-based wages. Soon, English, French, and German merchants copied the model. He knew exactly what he wanted: an efficient piston engine that used less fuel and produced less waste. But he was missing one key component: a way to generate pressurized steam. What role did coal play in powering the Industrial Revolution? And how did it transform the world? Make sure to subscribe to find out. See you next time. Every evening after dinner, Watt would walk to his workshop. There he tinkered with springs and valves, testing dozens of ideas until one day he hit upon the solution. He took a hollow cylinder, attached a firebox to it, filled it with water, sealed it tightly, and then heated the firebox with coals. The pressure from the rising steam forced the piston forward. When the piston reached the end of the cylinder, Watt shut off the firebox, releasing the pressure and letting the piston move back. He hooked the piston to a valve that opened and closed a mine shaft, pumping out water faster than anyone thought possible. Watt called his creation the separate condenser because he separated the boiler from the cylinder, a seemingly simple improvement that dramatically increased efficiency. On February 11, 1776, he received a patent for his invention. The engine was an instant success. Miners immediately adopted it. Before long, brewers, distillers, printers, glassmakers, and more were using it to power their machines. The textile industry boomed, and over the next 2 centuries, some European cities grew from 10,000 to 100,000 inhabitants. Until the mid-18th century, Europe was fueled by human and animal power, wind and flowing water. The countryside was dotted with windmills grinding grain, sawing wood, pumping water, and milling cloth. In the Netherlands, windmills drained marshlands, enabling farmers to grow crops and rear livestock. In England, they pumped water out of mines, deepening the pits and extending their lifespan. And in the hills of Wales, they even powered blast furnaces to smelt tin. But these weren't the only sources of power available. Harnessing the energy of falling water was another option. Starting in the late Middle Ages, millers installed water wheels along streams to power saws, looms, and other tools. The best location for water power was near fast-flowing rivers with regular rainfall, like those in Great Britain. Here, entrepreneurs set up small workshops or factories, groups of machines clustered together to produce goods. These early factories were usually owned by wealthy merchants who used them to mass-produce textiles like wool, linen, and cotton. The most famous of these were the English cloth halls, large workshops housing looms that produced high-quality fabrics like broadcloth for clothing and upholstery. But despite these innovations, the pace of life remained steady and slow. A job took as long as it needed to be done. If the delivery deadline was tomorrow, it would take all night to finish the order. But if it was due in a week, it would take all week. Machines simply didn't exist to do the work. Humans and animals were the engines driving society. And it wasn't until James Watt harnessed steam that the possibility of industrialization could finally be realized. For the first time, more people lived in urban areas than rural ones. At first, these factories operated with water power. But in 1769, a man named James Watt solved a major problem and forever changed the course of history. But the bubonic plague arrived in Europe in 1346 and killed almost half of the continent's population. Did you know that they all exist because of James Watt? He didn't invent electricity or plumbing, but he did make an invention that ushered the world into the machine age. Born in 1736 in the Scottish town of Greenock, Watt started tinkering at an early age. One day, while working on his family's farm, he noticed that a nearby stream could be used to power a saw. He began experimenting with moving machinery using flowing water, which led him to become a surveyor and then a teacher of mathematics at the University of Glasgow. But Watt always wanted to improve things, and his teaching position gave him access to just the thing to tinker with: machines. His first big project was improving the hot air engine invented by French physicist Jacques Deschamps. After buying the patent, Watt made improvements to the design. He added a separate condenser to remove excess steam, increasing efficiency and creating the new common atmospheric engine. Though it wasn't revolutionary, the engine saved coal and enabled miners to drill deeper shafts, which gave Watt a front-row seat to the problems plaguing British mines. They were drowning in coal smoke and struggled to pump out the water filling their pits. That's when Watt decided to fix that problem once and for all. Historians estimate that about 25 million people died, including almost every member of Norway's royal family. By 1350, the continent's population had been cut nearly in half, and as survivors emerged, they found themselves living in a transformed world. The plague's impact went beyond the loss of life. Widespread death led to massive labor shortages. Farmers abandoned their fields and peasants revolted against their lords. Trade networks broke down and towns became overgrown. During the plague's peak, commerce plummeted by up to 50%. Workshops sat empty and merchants went bankrupt. Across Europe, feudal systems crumbled. Peasants left their villages for the cities, looking for better opportunities. With fewer workers tending fields, agricultural production declined, leading to famine and hunger. Food prices doubled, tripled, or in some cases quadrupled. Labor shortages also affected manufacturing. With fewer workers producing textiles, finished products became scarce and expensive. If you thought it was with the wheel, you wouldn't be alone. When I tell my students this question, almost everyone says it's the wheel. But the truth is that the story of civilization actually starts with another simple invention, the axe. About 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus started chopping down trees and turning the wood into sharp flakes. They took these flakes, tied them to sticks, and bang, civilization was born. No one knows exactly where it happened because stone tools like these are too old to survive, but archaeologists have found evidence of their use across the world. As the Ice Age ended and temperatures rose, wooded areas expanded, allowing animals to flourish. Human ancestors followed them and developed new tools to hunt them. For the first time, people had to cooperate to take down big game. They formed communities. They also needed to store their food, so they built granaries and shelters. They settled down and invented farming. A few thousand years later, civilizations spread from the Fertile Crescent to China's Yellow River Valley to the banks of the Nile and Mexico's Lake Tex. Everywhere, humans planted seeds, domesticating animals and cultivating crops. The world entered an era of unprecedented growth. Over the next 2,000 years, empires and kingdoms rose and fell. The ancient world gave way to the Middle Ages, and the pace of change seemed to slow right before our eyes. In the 14th century, Europe had about the same population as Rome did in the year zero. In the 16th century, it was still just over 1 billion. Enter a new way of making cloth. If you live in a city, chances are you've seen these three symbols of modern life: traffic lights, sewer drains, and power outlets. In 1765, he rented a cottage in Soho, London, to focus on designing a more powerful engine. But the world Watt was entering wasn't ready for change. So in the next episode, we'll dive into the consequences of harnessing steam power. How did the steam engine change manufacturing?